Hi, Anthony Bob Barker, and we're back today with the final installment of our patio furniture set. We're going to be showing you guys how we made this end table here. So, let's get started. Alright, so this is going to be the final build in our patio furniture set series. So if you haven't seen any of the other ones, I'll leave a link to a playlist up there for you to check those out. So to get started, we're just going to be cutting all of our frame pieces down to size, and of course using the stop block over there to make sure everything is nice and even from side to side. And one thing that I do have to fix is this lumber. It comes with a natural little curve on the edges, but with those joints I want them to be nice and tight. So to take care of that, what we're doing here is we're just shaving off just a little bit off the edges, so that way all the corners are nice and square. So when we butt them up together to make the joints, it's going to be completely flush. And like the other projects in this series, we're going to be using the beadlocks to put a lot of these together. So it's pretty much the same process. I just make sure I mark out the center lines where I want those beadlocks to go. Clamp them on, and then this has two settings. It's an A and a B, so it just kind of staggers the holes what you're making for the tenon to go in. So you just drill that out, move that over, drill it out again. And like I've mentioned in some of the other videos, I have noticed that it's much easier to get this to fit right if you just do a little bit of chiseling it out and cleaning up that hole after you do it. And you do want to be really careful on how you're clamping that down, because I've noticed it does have a tendency to just kind of shift over a little bit at times, so you want to make sure you got a good hold. So next up, we're going to be putting down the bottom piece of the frame together. So I'm gluing up all of the joints and all of the tenons and putting it all together. And we're just going to go ahead and just kind of get all of those in place and then clamp it together and let it dry up. And you do want to be careful with some of this lumber, because you want to make sure all the edges kind of go together nicely. So just take your time, make sure your joints are nice and tight. Otherwise, it has a tendency to kind of skew a little bit. Then it's not going to be completely flat. And I was extra careful to make sure that didn't happen, so I continuously checked it to make sure that it stayed nice and flat against my bench there. And then also after I got the clamps on, I came back with this small square just to make sure that nothing got a little wonky during the glue up. And I did take my time to do some extra sanding throughout this before we put some of the pieces together, although I will be doing more later. But some of them, it just makes it easier if you do it early enough. So now this is the top piece, and so I'm kind of doing a funky joint here. So the holes you see are for the top part of the frame, but I want to add some extra ones to keep the leg together with the top piece. So we're doing a combination here of the beadlocks, as well as we're just going to do some pocket hole screws that are going to get hidden on the inside as well. So it's kind of like a multiple different types of joinery there, but I think in the end it's going to make it nice and strong. I'm kind of just going by the seat of my pants with this build, seeing how it turns out, but I think it kind of works out in the end. And during this glue up, I use those kind of square thingamabobbers that I use when I'm making cabinets, just to keep everything nice and in place while I'm putting in the pocket holes. Make sure it stays nice and 90 degrees. And like I said, you don't have to worry about those pocket holes, because those ones right there are going to be hidden. And I didn't put those on the bottom because there's no good way to hide them there, so we'll come up with a different joint there. And like I said, I'm just continuously doing sanding throughout it. It's just easier just to do a little bit at a time, although I will do it even more at the end. So after I got that all prepared, the supervisor wanted to come and check my work to make sure it's up to his standards, which of course is very important. So after a thorough examination, he has decided it is up to his standards, and since there are no cats around he can see, I'm okay to proceed. So with his paw of approval, now we can move on and glue up the top piece. And you can see I do have the legs already there. It was just easier to do that first, and also it's going to be hiding those pocket holes on one of them as well. So you wouldn't be able to put those legs on in this way afterwards. So just like before, gluing everything up, and then we're going to be putting it in clamps and letting that dry. And of course, just like on the bottom portion, you want to be really careful when you're doing it to make sure that nothing kind of gets moved or skewed. Otherwise, it'll be a little bit noticeable in the end if it's not nice and clean joints and level and square. So after that's done, we're going to be making some support pieces for the top slats here. So I'm just getting some scrap wood down and kind of cutting it to size. Then after that, we'll be going back to our miter station using our stop block again to get the slats cut down. But before I install them, I want to make sure we kind of break the edges here to kind of create a little bit of a nicer transition. And I'll be doing the similar thing to the slats themselves. And then to put those in, I just basically put a few of the slats in because that'll get me, you know, nice and flush with the top. And I just having those in place, we just put in our supports, kind of just squeeze them into place and put a little clamp pressure. That way when we screw them, we know everything's going to fit up exactly the way we want it. And with these ones, you do want to make sure that you drill it as well as countersink it, because you don't want it to split the wood because it's not necessarily the biggest pieces here. And if you ever take a peek through the slat corners and you see like kind of the screw holes, it'll just look nicer. So with that prepared, next part we're going to be putting the bottom piece onto the legs. So for this one, I'm just starting off by gluing the joints, and I'm just going to clamp those in place until that dries. And like I said, we're not using the pocket holes here, but I do have another plan just because I wouldn't be able to hide those pocket holes and it just wouldn't look quite right. So after we get them glued up, and I just put those little pieces of wood there just to kind of hold up the clamps. It just kind of gives me a good angle that I wanted. And so I don't bang up the wood. So for here, we're just sanding down the slats, and I'm using my sander just to break those edges, just as like a tiny little kind of round over on there. And that, like I said before, that gives you good transition. So after the glue is relatively dry, we're going to be putting some lag screws in here to hold this joint together. So I start with the Forstner bit to drill that out, and then I get a drill bit and go as deep as I can in there as far as it was going to let it go, and then basically just kind of bolt in that, I'll screw in the lag screw. And that's going to hold it pretty tight. So you can kind of see there, it's nice and sunk down. That way it's not going to interfere with the bottom, won't hit the ground or anything like that. So then just repeat that same process on the other side, and those joints should be nice and strong. Now, I was careful with the measurements of everything just to make sure that I was avoiding where I have that beadlock tenon. So that's not going to be a problem because that's off to the side. So after those are done, now it's time to put in those slats. And first I start off with a shot where you can't see anything. Great videography by me, I must say. So once I realized I was blocking the camera, then I move over to do the other one. So I'm just kind of putting my spacers in there and, clamping them in place, and then we just screw them in. And whenever you're doing builds like this and you kind of have the different spacing between them, it's always a good idea to do a dry fit first, just because, you have your set dimensions that you're building in, but during the build process, it's, very often things are off just a little bit. So that can really affect your gaps and make them look a little funky if you don't adjust for that. So now we're getting the last piece in here, and we're hitting the home stretch with this build for this end table. So get all that taken off, and then the next step is going to be putting a round over. So we just kind of go over all the edges, and of course in the little corners you won't be able to get the round over bit in there, but I just use a little combination of hand sanding and my hand palm sander as well, just to kind of get that exactly how I want it. So after that, I give the whole thing one final sanding, and then we can move on to the staining. And since this is all one big set, we're using the same color that we did on the other ones. So we just kind of go through. I kind of like to do the bottom first. Don't ask me why. It's kind of my process. Then we go through and stain the rest of it. And we did use the same spar urethane finish, and now we're doing the legs, which I'm just using these little rubber stops. Nice and simple. You just screw a hole and then screw those in. And I did notice there was just a slight little wobble on the bottom. So to compensate for that, I took a couple of the pieces that I shaved off when I was first starting the build, and I just cut those because the pieces of wood were so thin, glued them together, and basically these are going to act like little shim/washers. So I taped it on here so I can drill a hole through it, and then the screw with a rubber stop is just going to go right through that. And just those couple tiny little pieces was enough to get rid of that slight little wobble that we had. So you can see here that we're just already have that on. We just screw it in, and then that's done. So here's the final product. I'm pretty pleased with how it came out, and more importantly, the wife loves it. All right, so that's the build. It came out really good, and it's actually pretty sturdy. I do have an extra one that I made, and we're going to be testing its strength on the next one, so stay tuned for that video. In the meantime, if you want some detailed plans so you can make this yourself as well as the rest of the patio furniture set, check out the link below. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in the next one.